Okay, thanks very much, and good morning, good afternoon or evening to you all wherever you are. It's interesting that we start the session with the analysis, which typically comes last, but obviously there have been other things going on, and I hope you've taken the chance to look through Ray's initial introduction online to ethnography, which was great. I'm going to talk a little bit about the analysis that comes with ethnographic work, and really this applies pretty much whether you're doing field trips, in the bottom right hand corner is Margaret Mead doing one of her field trips, or whether you've done self-ethnography or indeed any other form of ethnographic work. So that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be talking about. I think one of the first things to say is that however we do the analysis, we've got to be very careful we don't fall into the what you see is what you get trap. Market research in general and ethnography in particular is very often misunderstood by many people involved in the buying and selling of it, and nothing more so than is true for ethnography. So what we see on the film or the notes that we take is not simply the only thing that we ought to be doing. So let me just talk a little bit more about that. There we go. We have a number of different themes that we have to analyze, and just to cover off a couple of these in a little bit more detail later on, an overview, stats on behavior, observations and notes, how we code actions and events that take place during our ethnographic sessions. Obviously the thing that is most usually associated with ethnographic work is a video and maybe a transcript analysis. Do we use computer? And of course at the end of the day, what are the client objectives? We have a lot of different things that we can do, but essentially, unless you know what it is you're trying to achieve, then you're bound really for failure. And that's not necessarily a political comment there on our poor Liberal Democrat leader, but nonetheless, it's worth thinking about exactly what it is that you want to achieve. During a lot of the sessions that we run ethnographically, we'll be taking lots and lots of videos, and that's probably the normal and main format in which we collect data these days. But also, and in no way to put into second place, notes, diagrams, what we call artifacts and so on. And just to give you an idea of what kind of things you can collect, during a recent ethnography on cooking and shopping, or shopping and cooking I suppose, these are some of the extremes that people went to. The lady that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner is a still, used the hob 13 times, the waste bin 4 times, 5 minutes looking for utensils, climbed kitchen steps 8 times, and so on. This has got a lot of value for clients who want to understand more about how a kitchen is used, how kitchen utensils are used, and I'll come back to a couple of those things in just a moment. One of the things that you can obviously do in the analysis stage is get a text transcript. Now this raises a number of key issues. I can really only mention a couple of them here. Format, qualitative data analysis using computers is absolutely great, providing you do have the time and the resources for getting a transcript and a codification system built in, and lots of staff to help you doing that. But obviously it also presupposes that video material or audio material, that your text is actually more than just a few snippets. So you really need to think in terms of how much of the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hour session you're actually going to record. We usually start off with a fairly simple shooting guide, and really the simpler the better, but this forms a template, if you like, for some of the analysis areas, and I don't propose to read any of that out, but it's a very simple little aid-memoir of things that we should be looking out for. But when we actually come to do the analysis, then we'll have a little bit of a format into which we can slot material that we get, at least as a starting point. Obviously, when we do the analysis, we're looking at a number of different dimensions to our respondent, our actors' dimensions. And again, I'm not going to read all of those out, but it will vary according to the subject matter you're looking at. Certainly things like race and ethnic relations, health and illness, psychology, both personal and social, have an awful lot to do with it, and indeed does economics and environment. So these are again little headings that you might want to populate with findings as you go through. We also have a number of different ways that we can utilize our internal eye, our external eye, depending on whose philosophy you want to take. You could take an NLP one, or you can take an ethnography one, which would make a distinction between emikinetic. And again, Ray's covered off some of those points in his introduction, so I won't repeat those. But one of the things that's most important that we do is collect data and analyze data according to all of the different things that we see there. And one of the important things that I find is always to look for the notice board or the fridge freezer in kitchens. This tells you an awful lot about what people are doing in their lives, the important things, and it allows us to collect visuals, and it allows us to collect references and symbols, which we use a lot in the analysis. As I said, videotaping is probably the normal way. Quality is an important issue when we come to do the analysis, particularly when it comes to the presentation of results. You can see in the little shot in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got a handheld camera, but also what you can't see is that the lady is wearing a microphone. Very high on technical qualities, both sound and video, but not quite so naturalistic. Do respondents feel self-conscious? This really is more to do with content than the analysis, but you need to take this into consideration when you're analysing. But it's more important, I think, to consider what they may be leaving out rather than what you've actually seen, particularly true for self-filmed ethnography or self-ethnography. We can very easily come up with 100 or 200 or 300 hours of film to go through, and what maybe a lot of people don't realize is just what a lot of time and what detailed hard work, and some of our other panelists are far better at giving you detail on that. But certainly finding the right clips and so on is really very hard. We also find that different client bases, American and UK particularly, have different expectations of the level of quality, broadcast quality film that we show them. So with all that information, that data in mind, how do we do it? What have we got? Well, I've always worked on the basis of what I call a modified grounding theory. I'm not sure Glaser and Strath would acknowledge this in its entirety, but certainly a review of the data to start with is the most obvious and key starting point. For every hour I film or for every hour I observe, it will probably take 2 to 3 hours reviewing that material before I can come up with the key themes that emerge, so the next level up. Having established what the key themes are, then the next stage I find useful is to take example and significance of these themes. So what does the data say? What are the key themes that emerge? What are good examples of those themes? And then what on earth does it mean, both for the client and for the more general interpretation? We do this in a couple of different ways. There is obviously the freehand, the very old format for us old qualitative researchers and ethnographers used to be lining paper, which we used to put on a very large table and just draw connecting lines and lots of notes and observations. Very flexible, very easy to follow themes with color coding and so on. Can be certainly used within digital time codes for clipping and so on, and certainly very easily allows you rolling hypotheses. You can use Excel for that. I've seen a lot of examples of that. My keyboard dexterity is not brilliant, so I'm a little bit wary about that, but certainly I know people who will do a two-dimensional table using questions and respondents, and can certainly be allied very nicely to transcript analysis. I find it a little bit cumbersome, and I spend too much time worrying about Excel, not enough time worrying about the content. Certainly there are various forms of QDA and text analysis. The obvious ones are Atlas and Vivo Nudist, but there are a number of other ones. I've not found those to be particularly user-friendly from my perspective, but nonetheless the analysis tools are there for you to use. Really all I can say in conclusion is that the obvious trap into which you should not be falling is simply to take a nice bit of video and say, gee, look at that, isn't that exciting, we'll show that to the client, with no analysis potential whatsoever. So I think my message to the NewMR ethnography workshop would be to take some time and trouble to work through systematically and in great detail the observations, both video and otherwise, that you've got, and to create a format which will allow you to work up from the data to the interpretation.